This is the weekend edition of Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, our weekend show is, of course, all about the two of us each nominating what we think is the biggest story of the week, the most remarkable story. We will find a sleeper story, one that's not getting the attention that we feel that it deserves, and then our favourite story. And, of course, every week, because this is so competitive, because this is really, it is essentially the Olympics of business news. We are joined by a judge, and normally we'd be joined by our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang, who is actually riding a bike somewhere right now, enjoying a good old-fashioned cycling holiday. So instead, we are joined by Jennifer Duke, economics correspondent at Capital Brief and occasional Fear and Greed presenter. Jen, good morning.
Good morning. It's good to be back judging you this time.
I'm not so sure about that, Jen. I'm not so sure about that. Now, I do have a question about Adam not being here. Riding a bike around all week. Is that a holiday? Really?
Not to me.
No.
What about you, Jen?
Hell no.
No,
Okay,
absolutely not. Good. Adam, you're on your own.
So the first decision of the day is actually a unanimous one. We all agree that Adam's holiday is not really a holiday. Let's jump straight into it now with the biggest story of the week. Sean, it's your first weekend show back after a bit of a break, so you can go first on this.
It's very, very exciting, my story. People made and lost a fortune this last week, all on the back of US bond yields. Yep. Gets the heart racing, US bond yields. Okay, biggest story, maybe not the most fascinating story, but bond yields really gets the blood pumping. So, bit of an explanation here. A bond is like an IOU issued by federal governments or state governments or big companies, little companies for that matter. A bond issued by the US government is a very, very safe investment, about as safe as it gets, since Washington would pretty much have to fall over for it not to be repaid. This week, the yield or return on a 10-year government bond in the US hit 4.6%. That's its highest level in 15 years. So keep that in mind. Why do we care about this? Because other asset classes, think equities, currencies, property, alternative investments, all sorts of things, rely on those bond yields. Now, a couple of reasons for that. First, whatever the bond yield is, it kind of becomes the baseline for investments. For example, if you want to take on equities, you want to make sure you're getting much more than 4.6%. Second, the bond yield is used to value future earnings of other investments. It's something called the discount rate. And basically, the higher the rate, the lower future earnings in many other asset classes like equities. Wrapping that all up, higher bond yields means equities look less attractive. So 15-year highs in US bond yields triggered big falls in equities. In the US, in Australia, equity markets hit 11-month lows, triggered a big drop in the Aussie dollar to below 64 US cents. In fact, it hit 62.83 cents was its low. The idea there is you want to be holding US bond yields, i.e. you need US dollars, you don't want Aussie dollars. That's what's happening there. All sorts of machinations going on in the commodity markets around oil particularly. People have made and lost a lot of money this week on the back of bond yields. Now, how often, Jen, do you get to get excited about bond yields? Big story.
My blood is definitely pumping.
I can tell. A lot of excitement in the house.
Pumping in anticipation of that story being over. Look, the biggest story, I'm just going to jump straight in here because I'm taking a different approach this week. I'm actually just going short and sweet.
Whoa, you've changed over the last month. Normally you crap on for minutes and minutes and minutes.
Well, let me tell you something that happened last week, Sean.
Oh, here we go.
And
not that short and sweet. Go on.
No, well, okay, well, I haven't officially started yet. I'll start in a minute. But last week, I did something that I think could possibly be the most dishonourable thing I've done on this show, right?
Whoa, that's quite the benchmark.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so last week we had a guest judge filling in. So it was I was competing against Jen, of course, and Tim Burrows joined us, media commentator and the publisher of Unmade. And he did a fantastic job whenever he fills in as a judge. And anyway, he'd given me I'd asked him early in the week, said, hey, would you like to fill in as the judge? He said, yep, love to. I think it's about time somebody cracked down hard on omnibus stories, on people cramming too many stories into one. And so I took that little nugget of information and I kept that to myself. And not only did I keep that to myself, and then encouraged Jen to to do an omnibus story.
And I took the bait.
Oh, that is beautiful.
And I still lost.
Wow. Actually, the only thing I could compare that to, Michael, is, we made that rule that we're not doing economic stories. You can't have the biggest story being an economic story.
Yes. Yeah, the Joseph intervention it was called.
So we said no economics. So we're not allowed to do economics as the biggest story. So you can't do interest rates, for example. Sure enough, the next week, what does Michael do? Interest rates.
No, I didn't. I mean, I've got nothing to back that up, but it doesn't sound like something I would do.
So what are you doing this week then?
Interest rates?
Are you really?
Yep. Look, I mean, and only because the biggest story this week was actually interest rates, and it was the biggest for a couple of reasons, Sean. For one thing, you have every economist in the country was fascinated by it, just to see how Michelle Bullock went in her first meeting as Reserve Bank governor, and generally a lot of consistency with her predecessor Philip Lowe. Same assessments on inflation, employment, and house prices, and the like. It makes sense. She was previously deputy governor. She hasn't come in from outside, so it's probably not going to have a vastly different approach and vastly different views to what's been happening with Phil Lowe. So, I mean, that's good news, at least for a lot of people, perhaps for investors who like a bit of consistency, like a bit of predictability. But the other reason that this was the biggest story of the week was simply the importance of interest rate decisions. We are in a cost of living crisis, right? And mortgage holders hold their collective breath at 2:30 p.m. on the first Tuesday of every month now to find out if the household budget's going to take another hit, because we've already had interest rates go up by 400 basis points. And on a $600,000 loan, that's another $1,300 a month in mortgage repayments that you need to find from somewhere. And unfortunately, there might still be another rate hike to come, with the accompanying statement indicating that inflation is still too high. So we might not have seen the end of this just yet. But put it all together, the biggest story of the week for the economists, for us kind of everyday Joes with mortgages, for businesses, for the broader economy, short and sweet if you take out all that lengthy preamble.
Finished?
Yes, I'm finished. That was about 30 seconds compared to your 4.5-minute bonds masterclass.
So I'm just, can I wrap this up for Jen? Right? Because Jen is a guest judge. So your biggest story is the fact that there's a new governor who did nothing and interest rates didn't change. Is that
to say did nothing really downplays it. She provided consistency for the Australian economy and for mortgage holders everywhere, Sean.
I like the idea that Australia's collective households are holding their breath at 2:30. Can you imagine that, like 2:31? Just the expulsion of air around the country.
The carbon dioxide goes up.
That's right. Anyway, Jen, over to you.
Michael, I am obsessed with interest rates, as you know, so I feel like you're appealing to my subjective bias on this particular story. And yes, I am one of those people that holds their breath at 2:30 the first Tuesday of every month. But I kind of agree with Sean. Nothing happened this week on interest rates, and that was entirely expected. We spoke about it, or the economists have spoken about it, whereas bond yields are kind of under-discussed but a massive, massive story. And I actually also gave Sean full points for melodrama as well, which made him win this category. So, Sean, I'm giving the first one to you today.
Jen, I'm loving you as a guest judge.
I was going to dock a point for Michael for last week's dishonourable behaviour, but given he brought it up, I feel like I'll give him a pass.
Were you going to penalise me?
Well, you know, you should remember that at some point when you treat someone like that, they'll come back and judge you in future.
Yeah, and I wasn't expecting you to judge me the very next week. Yes, I thought I would get a little bit longer and maybe you might forget about it. Now's a very good time actually to mention what the criteria are for these stories. And look, Adam has very lengthy criteria.
Arbitrary, I think is a better word.
So, like they are, it's the economic importance and significance of a story. It's the timeliness of a story. It is his own subjective bias. The melodrama is there. And I know there's another category. I know there's
category,
5 of them.
Which is really important part of the show.
I can't remember what it was.
Absolutely no idea.
No, anyway.
In the other category.
Yeah, and the other one as well. It's also very important. So anyway, we are 1-0 and we're going into most remarkable. Can I go first, Sean?
Sure.
Look, I didn't in assessing stories, because there's a lot of choices around this week, some really remarkable stories, I didn't choose this story because our judge this week lives off-grid and is an advocate of solar energy.
Oh, you didn't. You suck.
Sorry. I don't think it's going to hurt.
No, very true. Very true.
But it also helps that this story is genuinely remarkable, right? So if we can just cast your minds back 1 week ago, right? Just picture where you were a week ago, and probably, depending on where you were in Australia, it was hot. Everybody had the aircon cranked up to the max, and you would expect that as soon as that happens, you would expect the coal-fired power stations around Australia to be cranked up to the max as well. Not so, right? Because with all of that glorious sun shining, rooftop solar in Australia supplied more than 50% of total demand on the national energy market, and coal power generation fell accordingly. What an absolutely incredible milestone, right, in our transition to renewable energy. I wouldn't want to be running a coal-fired generator right now. Last Saturday, coal power generation fell to below its previous lowest point. And how about this one? In Queensland and South Australia, from 1 to 1:30 p.m. on Sunday, rooftop solar met 99.7% of total energy demand. Half an hour, yes, but a pretty remarkable half hour. I think everything about this story is remarkable, and it doesn't matter if you have solar panels on your roof or you happen to live off-grid like our judge. Anyone would objectively see this as a remarkable story, the most remarkable story of the week. Sean.
It is a remarkable story. I do agree with that, Michael. In fact, without doubt, the second most remarkable story of the week. The most remarkable story, however, and this is the only time in 122 years this has happened. It's also a great story. Basically, the US House of Representatives Speaker Kevin McCarthy this week became the first speaker in history to be voted out of the top job. Now, 2 others have left the top job, but they left of their own volition. This is the first time the Speaker's been voted out. What happened is members of his own Republican Party sided with the Democrats to dump him. McCarthy's chief rival is a Florida congressman, a guy called Matt Gaetz. He's also a Donald Trump supporter. No one in the Republicans seems to like him, but they didn't mind what he did this week. He brought forward a motion to vacate, they call it, motion to vacate the Speaker's chair, which was supported by 11 hard right conservatives and all the Democrats. McCarthy was voted out 216 to 210. Now, the reason Gaetz brought on the challenge was that McCarthy worked with the Democrats to push through a bill over the last weekend, that avoided a US government shutdown. Most of the world thought that was a good idea to not close down the US government. Clearly not some of the right-wing conservatives in that country. The Speaker is among the most senior position in US politics. It oversees the lower house. Now, that house can't really pass legislation without a leader. So spending bills like money for Ukraine can't be passed, or keeping the bureaucracy operating, for example. That can't keep going. McCarthy's defeat pushes the Republican leadership totally into chaos. Of course, you've got Donald Trump sitting above all this. It won't help their chances in next year's election. The fact that for the first time in 122 years, the Speaker of the House in the US was ousted, and the implications that has for everyone else, truly remarkable. Jen.
Oh, this is a toughie. I agree, Sean, that is hugely remarkable and quite unprecedented, really, as much as we hate that word after however many years of overusing it. But gosh, Michael, solar and I guess that sort of incredible just half-hour period and what that tells us about what's possible, not to mention the implications that has for, I guess, a transition to net zero and businesses in the economy more broadly. I think I'm going to give you the most remarkable for this week.
Thank you, Jen. And look, I would have chosen that story regardless of who was the judge. But
I don't believe you for 1 second.
I think when Jen's judged, that 5th category is a second round of subjective bias.
Yes. It becomes doubly important.
2 lots of subjective bias.
Are you fighting the judge already, Sean?
Oh, absolutely. No, that's the fun of the weekend edition, isn't it? Normally it's Adam, and so we kind of open fire. I think we're holding back a bit on Jen, and there's no need for that.
Well, so far her decisions have been quite good.
Well, the first one was excellent.
Well, if you want something that really gets me interested, if they're heavily Australian, I also find them much more interesting. Whereas I feel like you've had US bond yields and a US story now.
Is there a part of the judging that says it's got to be local?
Well, Adam's allowed to make up his categories.
That's true. That's true.
Well, when I go for economic impact, I think economic impact for Australia. That's how I view that category. So there is a local aspect to that for me.
That is very worrying news for me ahead of my sleeper story. So, look, we'll take a very quick break. It is 1-1. We will come back in a second and I will try and find myself a new local sleeper story. All right, Sean, we are looking for a sleeper story of the week. This is a story that's perhaps not getting the attention that we feel that it deserves, or that it's going to become a bigger story further down the track. And as Jen has just informed us, there is a new category on which we're being judged, which is local relevance and local importance. So it's got to be an Australian story.
No, it doesn't have to be an Australian story. It's just that's what Jen likes. So I'm talking all about mortgage holders. How local is that? Pretty good. Basically, the last 12 months have been much tougher on homeowners or people with loans than the previous 3 years. Obviously, interest rates have been rising, but there's also a competition element to it. Competition's been slacking in the last 12 months. The banks haven't quite had their heart in competing with each other, preferring to rebuild profit margins. On top of that, we've had the so-called mortgage cliff, where people are shifting from fixed rate loans, which charge interest rates in the low 2s, to variable rate loans, where the interest rates sort of in the low 6s or so. Now, the Commonwealth Bank has long been the gorilla in the highly profitable home lending market, but in the past couple of months, it's actually been losing market share. And that could be good news for borrowers, because it's very unlikely that the country's largest bank is happy to continue to go backwards. Data from the regulator, a place called the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, shows that the Commonwealth Bank loan book has fallen, albeit slightly, the past couple of months. It's the first time that's happened to the Commonwealth Bank in about 20 years. Home lending is very price driven, and Commonwealth Bank for several months has been pricing its standard variable rate about 25 basis points above the number 2 player. That number 2 player is Westpac. That means Westpac's market share has grown, Commonwealth's gone backwards. The obvious response from the Commonwealth Bank, if it wants to win back market share, and I would be very confident that it wants to win back market share, is to cut rates. If it cuts rates, that sets off a whole new bout of mortgage competition in the market. And that would be great news for people with a home loan. A story to watch, a true sleeper story affecting plenty of people across the country, Jen.
That's good. That's a good story. And I like and you really kind of brought it home with the local relevance there in the last line. Look, for me, you know what? I'm going to stick to my guns on this. And I'm going with the sleeper story that I'd originally planned on doing, because this is big news out of the UK this week, which in hindsight is probably not the way you should start a sleeper story. More like quiet news out of the UK this week, because sleeper story shouldn't be so big. They're cracking down on smoking, right? Big time in the UK. And British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced that he would introduce a law change before next year's election that would see the age of sale rise from 18 every year. So a child aged 14 today, right, would never be allowed to legally buy tobacco. So it stops short of making smoking illegal altogether, as those who can currently buy it will still be able to, but it is designed essentially to protect kids. It is designed to be a health measure. And the Prime Minister said that, this is a quote, "Simply put, unlike all other legal products, there is no safe level of smoking. It will save more lives than any other decision we could take." Now, because smoking and related illnesses kill about 60,000 people a year in Britain. The cost of the health system is the equivalent of more than $32 billion a year. And there's no guarantee, obviously, that this legislation will pass, but the impact is huge, and shares in cigarette companies in the UK fell immediately after the announcement. The big question here, right? And I know you're both just sitting there going, all right, this is a good story. In fact, it's a fantastic story.
What the hell is this about?
But why is this a sleeper story?
Yes, that's it.
The question is, right, how long until we have this here in Australia? Because it's already in one other country, New Zealand. So think about this logically, right? New Zealand was first. UK is next. Logically, it's probably going to be us. And when that does happen, right, when the same rules are introduced here in Australia, we can point back to this episode here today and say the Oracle was right. And we are glad that he won the sleeper story on that day because he was right and he deserved it. Jen, do the right thing, please.
This is a really tough category. And Michael, I know you always struggle with this one, but that is actually a very good sleeper story. I was questioning till the end until you clarified why it fits in this category. And I am also questioning whether Australia will eventually do the same thing. But also, Sean, I mean, that's a great story with mortgages. And the CBA stoush went pretty significantly this week around, I don't know if you saw the piece around deposits and then backing a company that's helping people stump up a 20% deposit, which caused a lot of discussion online. And I think that has the opportunity to become a lot bigger than it is as well. And I wonder, I'm going to have to give you both a draw on this category, I think.
No,
I just can't.
Oh, Adam Lang, come on down.
I just think I'm going to have to. Like, it's so hard in that last, I think on the melodrama points, that probably evened you both out.
Oh, look, you know what, Jen? I respect your decision. And I think Sean didn't respect your decision. And I think maybe a demerit point is in order.
Actually, particularly don't respect it given the previous category you said it has to be local.
I know, but he gave us a local angle. I'm accepting a local angle.
Righto.
Anyway, all right, so that's 2-1 my way. And
it is 1.5, 1.5.
Thought I might be able to get away with that. All right, favourite story.
Go for it, Michael.
I will go. Look, I like space stories. There's no surprise there that I enjoy a good space story for my favourite story. Unfortunately, there is no good space story this week, so I've had to get another story altogether. I think I had a run of about 3 space stories in a row while you were gone, Sean. I didn't win any of them, but there were some good ones. But we had a good money story this week, and I love a story about cash. I mean, it's fear and greed. Of course, we would be talking about money every chance we get. We've had the first glimpse of what our new money is going to look like, with the face of King Charles III on the side, revealed by the Royal Australian Mint. It'll start with the $1 coin, then other denominations rolled out progressively next year. Now, this is big news, right? This is the first real change to the currency in 70 years. King Charles faces left on the coins. Queen Elizabeth faced right. Apparently, it's a tradition that they alternate, possibly to stop people getting confused between the two of them. Maybe, I don't know. Look, I love this story for a number of reasons. Number one is just how difficult it would be to sign off on your own image for a coin, right? Because you'd want to just keep adjusting it, keep tweaking it till you look like, I don't know, Brad Pitt or whatever the young person's equivalent of Brad Pitt is these days. Because it's not an ordinary portrait, right? It's not just a portrait that you can take down if you don't really like it anymore, or it's not like a picture that you're posting online and then you can just update it with a new one when you feel like it. This is on a coin. These are coins that archaeologists will be digging up in 1,000 years and going, look at this bloke. And they'll be assessing, as you did this week, Sean, about whether or not he looks a little bit jowly in the pictures. And I just thought you'd want to make sure that you are 100% happy and it looks like the best possible version of yourself before it goes out there. The other reason that I like this story, point number 2, is...
Do you reckon there's much melodrama in that? In thousands of years, archaeologists are going to be digging up these coins.
Well, they will be. I mean, you think about it. We're still finding kind of Roman coins and things now and examining them. They will be digging up King Charles's face and it's going, look at this. That is one of my life goals. Occasionally you see, not to be dug up and examined, but to
get your face on a coin?
No, to find a hoard of old coins. And occasionally you see them, and you're not going to find that many of them in Australia, obviously, but in parts of Europe, like you just, every now and then, like every couple of years, you see one of these fantastic stories of digging up essentially a treasure chest and just finding kind of hundreds of gold coins. And that is one of my life goals. It's probably a fairly unrealistic and unattainable one, but that's what life goals are for. Look, the other reason that I enjoy this story is because it raises these questions of how long are we actually going to be using coins for? I can't remember the last time I paid for anything with coins, apart from like a gold coin donation at school for a mufti day. And I think I think a far better way, right, to recognize the new monarch in our currency would be perhaps generating some ideas here to release an official credit card or debit card with his image on it.
Oh, on your iPhone.
Yeah, maybe, yes. Use his effigy on the Apple Pay app icon on your phone. Then it would truly be more relevant in 2023. And how about this idea? This may just help to preserve the monarchy and actually just kind of stave off that shift to a republic for a few more years, because all of a sudden you'd be opening up your iPhone, you'd see King Charles, you're going to say I'm going to pay with Charles cash today. Ding, paid. And in doing so, you're like, I like the monarchy. I reckon we stay. That's why it's my favourite story.
That's obscure. I mean, I like it.
Yeah,
it's just obscure.
We went off in a few odd directions, didn't we?
We did. That's all right.
Sean, what's your story?
Look, this is a very serious, painful story out of the New York Times, which all of us can somewhat relate to. A woman is suing Walt Disney World after she slid down a 214-foot slide and experienced a very, very painful wedgie and suffered severe and, in fact, she claims permanent bodily injury. Now, the incident occurred in late 2019. The woman was riding the Humunga Cowabunga ride as part of her 30th birthday celebrations. Promotions for the Humunga Cowabunga ride says it's a near vertical 5-story drop in the dark. Now, clearly there's a severe wedgie risk. We know that any ride you go on in one of these theme parks brings into the wedgie risk comes into it. There is instructions at the top of the slide telling people to cross their legs at their ankles. Now, according to her allegation, the force of the ride meant the woman couldn't keep her ankles crossed. The impact of the slide and her impact into the water at the bottom of the slide caused her clothing to be painfully forced between her legs, and then water rushed up inside her. The claim says it isn't frivolous. The woman was hurt and taken to hospital. She suffered gynecological injuries, and the lawsuit is seeking at least $50,000 in damages, accusing Walt Disney Parks and Resorts of negligence. Firstly, I hope the woman's okay, so just put that out there. But I just love this story because it's kind of like watching an episode of The Office. You know, when you watch The Office, everything is just a little bit too familiar. Like, it's just a little bit too familiar for comfort. And then when you hear about the wedgie story, anyone who ever has been on a theme park ride, you just sort of all get you just start shifting around because you all kind of know what's going on here. And that's why it's my favourite story for the week.
So it really is, as we discussed yesterday, Sean, that is one of those stories that the headline is very amusing when he's like, woman sues over serious wedgie or something. And you're like, oh, that's quite amusing. Then you get into the details of it and you're like,
yeah, and it's not really amusing.
And you're like, this is horrific.
Yeah, it is a horrendous story. You know, when I read that one through the week, I originally read the headline, giggled and went, what the heck? And then opened it up and read the story and I went, wow, that's shocking for that person involved.
Yep, exactly
and
the same.
I actually feel like she's been, treated pretty poorly by the media over the week around her suit because it sounds dreadful. So I don't know that I can make that my favourite, Sean. I just don't know that I can because I feel like it's just caused so much angst, I think, for that poor woman. And I've got to say, Michael, you don't know this, I don't think, but I'm actually mad into metal detecting and going out looking for treasure and coins.
Are you really?
I sure am. We have metal detector at home and we do go out on weekends looking for those coins.
Do you?
When you say people might be going out and detecting coins in thousands of years, I'm like, we already do it and we love it. And you can definitely find some interesting stuff in Australia.
How did we do the show for so long and this never came up? This is amazing.
I don't tend to put all my nerd cards on the table all up front.
It's a very safe place to put your nerd cards on the table. You are surrounded by nerds.
It is
here.
So I think for that reason, you get to have the favourite story.
Okay, so what's that? 2.5 to 1.5.
I miss you, Adam.
That is a comfortable victory. Do you have a points tally as well?
Well, it's actually pretty close in the end. So, Sean, you got 89 points and Michael got 92. So there wasn't actually a lot in it, which is interesting. Definitely the last category was where I think I docked most of your points, Sean. And most of the points came off for Michael around the interest rate story. So, there we go.
I figured that considering your job as economics correspondent at Capital Brief, going with interest rates would have been a safe bet. That's
illegal, an illegal bet because we've dropped interest rates. Just I'm reminding you.
Okay. No, we dropped the economy. I suppose actually it's part of the economy. Okay, I'm going to withdraw this objection and just enjoy my victory. 2.5.
Well done,
Jen. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jen,
and thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great weekend.